First things first, there is no such thing as a bad Madonna album, but the Queen of Pop's output since 2008's Hard Candy and continuing right through the 2010s is generally not considered to be Madge at her peak. In fairness, she did pioneer and lead the field for 25 years, and as they say, nothing can last forever. So in this video, I will analyse which of the diva's post-2008 albums and eras were her best. Yes, MDNA and Madame X do have their fans, but the general consensus is that Hard Candy and Rebel Heart were the better albums. Now, before we progress any further, I would like to stress that this video is not a takedown of Madge. In my humble opinion, Madonna is still the Queen of Pop, and her achievements over the last 4 decades are nothing short of astonishing. Her impact on popular culture is immeasurable, and her strike rate when it comes to hit songs and albums is unparalleled. So I will present arguments for and against both records to try and determine which Madonna album since Confessions was her best. Let's find out. Hard Candy, Madonna's 11th studio album, released on April 19, 2008, does not tend to rank highly amongst fans' favourite albums of the superstar, but retrospectively, many feel now it was judged unfairly, having arrived in the shadow of the hugely successful Confessions. And now the dust has well and truly settled, I think it's fair to say the album does have its own undeniable charms. Hard Candy was a disco pop record, but with an urban contemporary twist. Hip-hop inspired pop by the likes of Fergie, Nelly Furtado and Gwen Stefani had dominated international airwaves and charts in the mid-2000s. And with Warner and Madge reportedly disappointed with the performance of Confessions in the States, a more urban, American-friendly sound was decided upon. And Hard Candy was probably Madonna's last truly cohesive sounding album, unlike its follow-ups, which often sounded muddled and could have done with a bit of editing to the final track listing. And although it's hard to believe, Hard Candy was the last Madonna album which truly generated a big international smash for the superstar. The lead single, 4 Minutes, reached number 1 in the UK and number 3 stateside. Little did we know at the time it would be her second last top 10 hit in the US, up to and including the time of recording this video. Of course, this isn't a reflection of the quality of Madge's work. Radio are reluctant to play anyone over the age of 40, and it's pretty tough winning over younger demographics who consume most of their music through streaming, which of course is the main determining factor in a song's chart performance today. One of the main criticisms directed at the album was that the Queen of Pop had come to the Timbaland and Neptune sound late in the curve. And whilst that may be true, in my humble opinion, the album still sounds like a very expensive record, the kind only a major international pop star could make. Whereas MDNA sounded for the most part like something any flash in the pan pop star could churn out. And despite people saying Madge was too late to work with producers such as Timbaland and the Neptunes, Pharrell Williams went on to dominate the charts again a few short years later with a string of mega hits with Daft Punk's Get Lucky, Robin Thicke's Blurred Lines, and his own solo track, Happy. In my humble opinion, it's her strongest and most consistent album since Confessions, and it includes a number of solid deep cuts such as She's Not Me, The Beat Goes On and Devil Wouldn't Recognize You. And I know it's a controversial opinion, but I really like Incredible. Madge may no longer have been setting trends, but she seemed far more sure of herself than on subsequent albums, and the end result she was aiming for. She wanted to capture her earlier sound and gave producers a copy of her debut album at the start of Hard Candy. And despite accusations it didn't sound like Madonna, it was a genre of music Madge could legitimately lay claim to. She started her career as a disco R&B singer, and many people at the start of her career actually thought she was a black artist. Hard Candy was released in the months following the launch of the first iPhone, transforming how we consume music. and aiding the explosive growth of social media. And with the launch of Spotify in Europe in 2008, the distribution of music would be transformed again. Madonna just seemed like she was in more familiar territory in the 2000s, and it would take some time for her to get to grips with the digital generation in the following decade. After spending 10 years collaborating with cool, cutting-edge European producers, joining forces with big American ones like Tim and Pharrell kinda meant the hip factor was now gone. Madonna's reputation of being a trendsetter took a significant knock with Hard Candy. A quote from the British magazine NME at the time had this to say about Madge's new collaborators. By leaving it until 2008 to work with Tim, Pharrell and Justin, Madonna joins the party just as the lights are going down. And the era really only yielded 2 proper hit singles and 2 videos. The Miles Away promo was just the Sticky and Sweet tour footage spliced together. And the album photo shoot and the final cover chosen, the dominatrix boxer visuals with the background of pink peppermint swirls, tends not to be a favourite among fans. And the music landscape was on the cusp of changing dramatically in 2008. An unknown singer at the time by the name of Lady Gaga was gearing up to release her debut album in the months following Hard Candy's release. And with that album, the fame and the huge hits it generated, Gaga would usher in a new era of EDM, a sound which would dominate international charts in the early 2010s, leaving Hard Candy's production to date quickly. And the other album which could potentially vie for greatest album from the post-2008 era would be Rebel Heart. Madge's 13th studio album, released on March 6, 2015, was hailed by many critics at the time as her best work since Confessions. Whilst in some ways it may not have sounded like a traditional Madonna album, it was hard to deny there was very strong songwriting showcased on the record. Songs such as Ghost Town and the title track were thought by many to be some of Madonna's best work in years. And Madge made a good stab at keeping her sound current whilst also retaining her own DNA. With Rebel Heart, she did succumb to the common pop star practices of the 2010s by enlisting a dizzying array of writers and producers and experimenting with the songwriting camp method to create new material. And the accompanying tour of the same name was met with positive reviews. It felt uplifting and relatively light-hearted compared with her previous tour, MDNA, which received a mixed response from the media and left many puzzled, especially in the opening songs when Madge ran around the stage with a rifle, whilst blood splattered on giant screens in the background. And the mashup of Express Yourself with Gaga's Born This Way didn't do her any favours. Yes, Born This Way sounded very similar to Madge's song, but making such a point about it on a huge tour felt kinda petty. But whilst the music was good, it felt like Madonna was playing catch up again. She covered so much ground on the album, lyrically and musically, and much of it just didn't mesh. There were house, trap, dancehall and hip-hop influences alongside more traditional balladry, and many felt there were too many disparate themes and sounds all on the one album. Madonna later expressed in 2018 dissatisfaction with the songwriting camp process of creating music. And years later, in an interview with Vogue, she named Rebel Heart as her most stressful album to make. And fans agreed unanimously that the record would have benefited from a few songs being left aside, especially with the super deluxe version stretching on for 25 songs. And then there was the highly questionable inclusion of a convicted rapist, Mike Tyson, on the record, which left many feeling uneasy. And whilst it might be separate to the quality of the music, the Rebel Heart era was beset with issues and there was a great deal of bad publicity surrounding it. Not controversy generated by brave artistic statements, just actual bad press for the superstar. Leaks of the album in December 2014, 3 months before its planned release, proved to be such a problem, Madonna had to make 6 tracks available for download in December 2014 on the iTunes Store. Understandably upset, Madonna vented about the situation on her social media, but in the post she compared the leak to artistic rape and terrorism, which understandably sparked outrage. The comments would later be deleted. Madonna also reposted fan-made images on her social media of civil rights icons such as Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela and Bob Marley, in the style of her Rebel Heart album cover, with cord over their faces. Many found it disrespectful and inappropriate, and the superstar issued a defense the following day. Madonna seemed to struggle with the instantaneous nature of social media and this new world where everyone had the ability to express their opinions publicly online. Then there was the kissing of Drake on stage at Coachella shortly after the album's release, only for the Canadian rapper to look disgusted after the kiss ended, not to mention her onstage fall at the 2015 Brit Awards. Rebel Heart was also the second album on Madonna's huge $120 million 360-degree deal with Live Nation, which many felt there was a greater emphasis placed on touring and licensing deals during that period, in order for Live Nation to recoup the money they had spent on Madge. And as mentioned already, it's not really Madonna's fault there were no hit songs in Britain or America. Radio doesn't want to play artists over the age of 40. And by 2015, success on the singles charts was largely determined by streaming. And Madge struggled to compete with younger artists in this new digital era. Of course, the final decision is very subjective and down to every individual fan. Personally, I would choose Hard Candy as Madonna's truly last great album and era. The Queen of Pop was in more familiar territory musically and in terms of the industry and how it operated, just before social media would transform the world around us. And in my humble opinion, it's the most solid collection of songs she's released since '08. Whilst it might not be a classic Madonna record, she sounded more relaxed, more sure of herself and her music, and much more like the Madonna Louise Ciccone her fans fell in love with in the first place. And don't forget to check out my Madonna playlist, which includes videos looking at a number of Madonna eras. Thanks for watching.